Every night the wind screamed like a man begging for his life, and the locked door at the top of the lighthouse rattled as if someone or something was trying to get in. The isolation of that crumbling tower on the jagged Maine coast suited me fine. No questions, no past, just me and the sea. Its stone walls stained by salt and time, its leather cover cracked, pages yellowed and brittle. The entries were meticulous, written in a tight. The wind didn't just blow it, screamed, a guttural wail that seemed to come from inside the walls. I'd lie awake in my cot, the blanket pulled tight. The shouts were louder now, clearer, calling Daniel, in a voice that wasn't quite human, like it was shaped by the wind itself. When dawn broke, the knocking stopped, the light burned steady, and the tower was silent. I packed my bag, ready to quit, but I couldn't leave without knowing. I climbed to the lantern room, my heart pounding, and checked the logbook one last time. A new entry was there, in that same slanted script. Daniel, stay. The light needs you. My name, written in ink that looked wet. I dropped the book, ran down the stairs, and didn't stop until I reached the mainland. I searched the tower, top to bottom, looking for anything, a loose shutter, a broken pipe that could explain the sounds. The locals say the light still burns, even though no one's tended it since I left. They say, on stormy nights, you can hear a man shouting from the rocks, calling for the keeper. I don't know what Elias saw out there, or what he became, but I know one thing, that lighthouse isn't empty. And whatever's inside knows my name. Nothing. The logbook became my obsession. I read it cover to cover, noticing patterns. Elias mentioned the light flickering every time the shouts began. Bye. I checked the bulb again, and sure enough, it dimmed one night, pulsing like a heartbeat. Bye replaced it, but the new one did the same. And then I saw it, a shadow outside on the catwalk, moving against the wind, listening to the shouts, desperate, pleading, always just beyond understanding. I checked the logbook again, flipping through Elias's entry. October 1973 was a brutal month. Storm after storm, the light failing, supplies running low. Elias wrote of the man in the storm, someone he saw on the rocks, waving for help. But every time he went to look, no one was there. The final pages were frantic, ink-smudged, as if written in a panic. He's closer now. He knows my name. Slanted scriptilious wards from the 1970s. The bulb worked fine, but the glass up there seemed to hum, a low vibration that set my teeth on edge. One night, I heard footsteps on the stairs low, deliberate, like boots dragging on iron. My hands trembling as I shoved a chair against it. The shouts were relentless, now battering the tower like the storm Elias described. Bivai. I opened the logbook, reading his last entry again. He's out there, screaming, God, help us. Below it, in different ink, someone had scrawled, he's in here now. My stomach dropped. The shouting stopped, replaced by a soft knock at the lantern room door. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, deliberate, like someone testing my nerve. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knob rattled, the chair creaking, as something pushed against it. I grabbed my flashlight and called out, my voice shaking. Who's there? Silence. I crept to the staircase, shining the beam upward. The spiral was empty, but the air was freezing, my breath visible in clouds. At the top, the door to the lantern room was shut. I'd left it open. Most were routine. Wind speeds, tide levels, maintenance, notes. But the final entry, dated October 12th, 1973, stopped me cold. Storm coming. Worst I've seen. Lights flickering. He's out there, screaming. God, help us. The words felt alive, like they'd been scratched into the page with a trembling hand. I closed the book, my skin prickling, and told myself it was just a story. Bah! The air in the room felt heavier, the silence too thick. The air inside heavy with damp rot. My first day, I climbed the spiral staircase to the lantern room, the iron steps creaking under my boot. The view was endless gray, waves gnashing at the rocks below, fog curling like fingers over the horizon. The job was simple. Keep the light burning, log the weather, and stay out of trouble. I was good at that last part, or so I thought. The locals warned me the place was cursed, said the last keeper. Elias Ward vanished in a storm 50 years ago, but I brushed it off as small-town folklore. I was in the lantern room, checking the bulb, when I heard it alone, mournful howl. Not like the wind, but something human carried on it. I froze, my breath fogging in the chilly glass door. The sound came again, sharper. A man's voice shouting words I couldn't make out, swallowed by the roar of the sea. I leaned out the window, scanning the rocks below, but there was nothing, just waves and darkness. The voice stopped as suddenly as it started. I chalked it up to exhaustion, the isolation playing tricks. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from the shadows of the tower. I should have listened. My name is Daniel Harper, and I took the job at Gull Point Lighthouse because I needed to disappear. The lighthouse was a relic. That first night, I found the logbook. It was tucked in a rusted cabinet in the keeper's quarters. The first strange thing happened a week later. The noises grew worse each night. I started avoiding the lantern room after dark. I stopped sleeping. I bolted the lantern room door that night. I don't know how I survived that night. I never went back to Gull Point. The lighthouse had been abandoned for decades. Its door locked tight, and I was sent to check on Thornwick Lighthouse, the air sharp with salt and decay. The lighthouse loomed over the cliffs, its paint peeled to grey, windows cracked like broken teeth. The iron door was rusted but locked, the key heavy in my hand. Anyone there? Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe fear of looking weak. Not from my flashlight, but from within, a soft, sickly light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The handprint seemed darker, more defined. and new prints appeared beside its smaller, overlapping. I drove straight to town, my hands trembling on the wheel. I didn't tell anyone what happened. They'd think I was crazy. The company sent another crew to Thornwick a week later. They found the lens clean. No handprints, no footprints in the dust. But they didn't stay long. They said the tower felt wrong, like something was waiting inside. The lighthouse is gone now, demolished last year. But I still hear that giggle in my dreams, and sometimes when I close my eye, I see that handprint wet and gleaming, like it's calling me back. As if a child had pressed both hands against the glass. I backed toward the door, my chest tight, and heard a new sound. A soft scraping, like tiny fingers dragging across the land. The shadows in the room thickened, forming a small, indistinct shape near the wall, a silhouette, no taller than my waist, swaying slightly. I checked the logbook in the keeper's desk. Its pages brittle and yellowed. Most entries were mundane. The giggles followed, echoing from every direction, bouncing off the stone like a chorus. Halfway down, I tripped my flashlight, rolling away, plunging me into darkness. Breathe. The air was heavy, pressing against my skin, and I felt something cold brush, my arm a fleeting touch, like a small hand grazing my sleeve. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, and ran for the door. It was still locked, but the key turned sluggishly, as if something was resisting from the other side. Bot 1, dated September 1979, stood out. Found a child's handprint on the lens again. Door was locked. She's still here. The keeper's name was illegible. The ink smeared. Another entry, a week later. Read. Heard her laughing last night. Light flickered. She's watching. My hand shook as I closed the book. The air was freezing now. My breath visible in puffs. My voice bounced off the stone, unanswered. I grabbed my radio to contact base, but it hissed with static, the signal dead. The giggle came again, closer, from inside the lantern. I spun around, my flashlight catching nothing but the lens and its eerie handprint. The glass seemed to hum, a low vibration that crawled up my spine. I stepped back, my boots scuffing the floor, and noticed something new, tiny footprints in the dust, leading from the lens to the edge of the room, where they stopped at the wall. Inside, the air was stale, thick with mildew, and the spiral staircase groaned under my weight. My flashlight cut through the gloom, catching cobwebs and dust motes that drifted like snow. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant crash of waves and the faint drip of water somewhere deep in the tower. A crumbling relic on a desolate stretch of the Nova Scotia coast. The place had been decommissioned since the 80s, left to rot after automation made keepers obsolete. My job was simple. Inspect the structure, assess the damage, and report back to the company handling its demolition. The locals called it a bad place, said the wind carried whispers of a child lost in a wreck long ago. But I didn't believe in ghost stories. I believed in paychecks. yet the tiny handprint on the lens was still wet, as if a child had just pressed their palm against the glass. I set down my toolkit and started my inspection, telling myself it was condensation, a trick of the light. But the air felt colder now, the room smaller, like the walls were leaning in. I checked my notes. The last maintenance log was from 1983, and the lighthouse had been sealed since. No one could have gotten in. I swept my flashlight around, the beam trembling in my grip. The shadows seemed to shift, pooling in corners where the light didn't reach. But I heard a faint sound, a soft giggle, like a child playing hide-and-seek, echoing from the staircase below. Noting cracks in the walls and rust on the frame, that's when I saw Ita, small handprint, no bigger than a child's, pressed into the center of the lens. It wasn't smudged or faded, it glistened, as if someone had touched the glass moments before I arrived. The tower was locked when I got here, the windows sealed, and I was alone. I touched the print, my fingers coming away damp, smelling faintly of seawater. My name is Ethan Cole. I arrived at dawn, the sky bruised with clouds. I reached the lantern room, a glass dome encasing the massive lens, its prisms dull with grime. I tried to shake it off. My heart thudded as I called out, "Hello." I don't know why I kept going. The giggle came again, sharp and clear, right behind me. I turned, but no one was there. The lens was glowing faintly. I bolted for the staircase, my flashlight flickering as I descended. When I stumbled outside, the fog had rolled in, swallowing the cliffs.
The fog was so thick that night, it swallowed the lighthouse beam. But when the light turned blood red, something inside the locked control room began to move. It was a routine assignment: monitor the light, log weather conditions, and stay sharp. The lighthouse stood on a jagged outcrop off the Oregon coast, a lonely tower battered by salt and wind. The veterans called it Old Red because of the rust stains streaking its walls, but they never mentioned the other kind of red. Not until it was too late. Most entries were standard, but one from 1987 caught my eye, written in shaky handwriting: "Light turned red tonight. Shadows moving inside." I staggered to my feet, my body trembling, and checked the logbook one last time. A new entry was there, in the same shaky handwriting: "Sarah, don't look at the light." My name, written in ink that glistened like it was still wet. I ran down the stairs, out of the tower, and didn't stop until I reached the Coast Guard station at dawn. Don't trust the glass. They said it was a faulty bulb, that the fog played tricks on my mind. But I know what I saw. Blackthorn Lighthouse is still operational, its light guiding ships through the fog. But on certain nights, when the haze is thick, they say the beam turns red, and if you're inside, don't look at the walls. The shadows are waiting. The keeper's name was scratched out, the page smudged with what looked like water stains or tears. My stomach twisted. I glanced at the walls, where the shadows were sharper now, forming shapes like hunched figures, their edges blurring as they shifted closer. I backed away from the glass, my breath fogging in the freezing air. The temperature had dropped, though the heater was still humming. I'm Sarah Klein, and I was 3 weeks into my Coast Guard training when they sent me to Blackthorn Lighthouse. Everything was normal, yet the red light pulsed faster, like a heartbeat. The shadows moved with it, the door rattled, the lock clicking as if someone was turning it from the outside. I screamed, pounding on the radio, begging for a response, but the static only hissed back. The red light flared, so bright it burned my eyes, and the shadows lunged, their forms breaking free from the walls, reaching for me with hands that weren't there. I dropped to the floor, curling into a ball, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Slinking along the walls, their forms stretching impossibly long. One seemed to pause, its head tilted, as if watching me. I grabbed my flashlight, shining it at the wall, but the beam only made the shadow darker, more defined a figure with no face. Its arms too long, fingers splayed like claws. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair, the crash deafening in the small room. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was only silence, thick and heavy, like the fog itself. The fog rolled in heavy, blanketing the sea in a gray shroud that muffled every sound except the low moan of the tide. They were faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the lens, but they grew clearer voices, overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. They came from the walls, the floor, the glass, as if the tower itself was murmuring. I clutched the logbook, my hands shaking, and found another entry, dated a week after the first, there in the light. They want out. The page ended abruptly, the rest torn out. My flashlight flickered, then died, leaving only the red glow to light the room. The shadows were everywhere now, crowding the walls, their shapes twisting into faces, hollow eyes, gaping mouths, all staring at me. The beam, usually a crisp white, flickered, then shifted to a deep, pulsating red. It wasn't a bulb malfunction. The equipment read normal, but the light pouring from the lens was wrong, like blood spilling across the fog. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light or fatigue. But when I looked again, the red glow was stronger, bathing the control room in a sickly hue. Shadows danced on the walls long, jagged shapes that didn't match the equipment or my own silhouette. They twitched, stretching toward the center of the room, as if reaching for me. I climbed the spiral staircase to the control room, my boots echoing on the iron steps. The room was small, all glass and steel, with the massive lens rotating slowly, casting its beam into the void. I checked the equipment, everything was in order. The light was strong, cutting through the haze, just enough to guide ships away from the rocks. I settled in with my logbook, the air cold and damp, smelling faintly of rust and seaweed. My first shift started at dusk. Around midnight, I noticed the change. Base. This is Blackthorn. The light's gone red. Any reports of equipment issues? Static crackled back. Then silence. I tried again, but the radio was dead. The fog pressed against the glass, so thick I couldn't see the catwalk outside. The only sound was the creak of the lens rotating and a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on the glass. I checked the door to the control room, locked, just as I had left it. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent, coming from all sides now, as if something was circling the tower. I radioed the mainland, my voice unsteady. I flipped through the logbook, desperate for an explanation. I tried to focus, checking the lens controls again. Then the whispers started. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, as the whispers grew into a chorus, chanting my name. Sarah, Sarah. When the light turned white again, the shadows vanished. The whispers stopped. The tapping ceased, and the door was still locked. I quit the next day,